Today, we're going to get real and maybe a little uncomfortable. You've heard it your whole life. Don't be selfish. But guess what? I'm here to tell you the exact opposite. Yep, it's time to flip the script. Ever wonder why you're so drained, always putting everyone else first? What if I told you that being selfish is the secret source to a happier, healthier, and more successful life? Let me get personal for a second. I used to be that person, the yes person. You know, the one who was always there for everyone, dropping everything to help out. It got to the point where I was completely burnt out. I wasn't just exhausted, I felt lost. My days were filled with everyone else's priorities, and I was nowhere on my own to-do list. But then one day, I hit a wall, literally. I was so tired I walked straight into a door, and that's when I realized I needed to be selfish. So in today's video, I'm going to give you unapologetically real reasons why you should be selfish too. Whether you're a people pleaser like I was, or someone who just never puts themselves first, this is for you. Buckle up, because this is going to get honest, controversial, and maybe even life-changing. Ready? Let's go. 1. Being selfish teaches you to prioritize. All right, let's dive in deep, because this one's going to stir some pots. Being selfish is probably the best thing you can do for your priorities. And let's be real, it's not something anyone wants to admit out loud. But the truth is, putting yourself first will teach you what actually matters in your life. Sounds controversial, right? That's because it challenges everything we've been taught. Think about it. From a young age, we're trained to be selfless. Share your toys, think about others, don't be selfish. Sound familiar? But no one ever tells you what happens when you always put others first. I'll tell you what happens. You become lost in a sea of other people's priorities, and suddenly, your life looks like a checklist of everyone else's needs. Trust me, I lived it. Here's a personal story for you. A few years ago, I was the ultimate people pleaser. I said yes to everything, helping out co-workers, taking on extra projects, being there for every family event, you name it. I thought I was doing the right thing by always being available. But here's the kicker. I never said yes to myself. I didn't even think about what I wanted because I was too busy making sure everyone else was taken care of. I didn't know what my priorities were because I was drowning in everyone else's. One day, it hit me. I was sitting at my desk late at night, finishing yet another project that wasn't even mine to begin with, and I just thought, what am I doing? I was exhausted, burnt out, and to be honest, a little resentful. That's when I realized I had no idea what was important to me anymore, because I had been spending all my time prioritizing everyone else. And that was the moment I decided to get selfish. Now, this is where things get controversial. When you start prioritizing yourself, the people around you aren't always going to be happy. Why? Because they've gotten used to you putting them first. The minute you start drawing lines, people will start calling you selfish, and they're not wrong. But here's the thing, being selfish teaches you to filter out what's important and what's just noise. And here's the hard truth, a lot of what we get sucked into every day is just noise. I remember the first time I said no after deciding to be more selfish. My friend asked me to help her plan a big event, a last-minute request, of course. In the past, I would have said yes without even thinking. But this time, I was exhausted, and I had my own plans, so I said no. Her reaction? Not great. I got the whole, "Wow, you're being really selfish" comment. For a split second, I felt guilty. But then I thought, wait, why should I feel bad for protecting my own time and energy? Here's the truth no one wants to talk about. You have to be selfish to understand what really matters to you. It's like when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. You can't be everything for everyone if you're running on empty. By being selfish, I learned to ask myself, what do I actually care about? What do I want to focus on? And that's when I started setting boundaries. That's when I started saying no to things that didn't align with my goals or well-being. Now, this doesn't mean I've become some heartless robot who never helps others. Far from it. But what it does mean is that I've learned the power of prioritization. I'm no longer sacrificing my own well-being to make sure everyone else is happy. And guess what? I'm happier, more focused, and way more in tune with what matters to me. Let's be honest, not prioritizing yourself is the fastest way to lose yourself. You'll wake up one day and realize you've spent years chasing after other people's dreams, solving their problems and fulfilling their needs, all while yours were left collecting dust in the background. The brutal truth is that no one is going to make you a priority until you do it first. Now, let's talk about the deep part. When you start being selfish, really unapologetically selfish, you're doing something powerful. You're sending a message to yourself that you deserve to be a priority, that your time, your energy, and your goals are just as important as anyone else's. And the wild thing is, once you start living like that, your entire life shifts. You'll notice that people begin to respect your boundaries more, and you'll have more time for the things that actually light you up. For me, once I started being selfish, I began focusing on my own passions, things that I had pushed aside for so long. I started creating again, diving into projects that mattered to me. And guess what? I found more joy and fulfillment than I ever had when I was constantly running around trying to meet other people's expectations. The bottom line, selfishness isn't about neglecting others. It's about including yourself in your own life's priorities. It's about knowing that you're worthy of the same care, attention, and time you give to everyone else. And once you understand that, your lifestyle starts to align with what truly matters to you. So go ahead, be selfish, and watch how everything changes. 2. It helps you avoid burnout. All right, let's talk about burnout. You know, that thing that creeps up on you when you've said yes to one too many things, have no energy left, and can't remember the last time you did something just for you. Yeah, that. Here's where being selfish swoops in to save the day. Being selfish is the ultimate burnout prevention tool, and yeah, I said it. If you're not being selfish, you're probably heading straight for burnout. I know. Saying, be selfish to avoid burnout, sounds super controversial because we're told that selflessness is a virtue. Society glorifies the hustle, the grind, and the ability to push through exhaustion like it's some badge of honor. But guess what? There's nothing noble about running yourself into the ground, and there's definitely nothing heroic about sacrificing your well-being for other people's endless needs. Burnout is not a personality trait. It's a failure to set boundaries. Here's the honest truth. Burnout is the direct result of not being selfish enough. Period. Think about the times you felt absolutely wiped out, physically, emotionally, mentally. Was it because you were too selfish? Nope. It was because you were too busy being everything to everyone, taking on extra shifts at work, going to every social event, picking up the slack for others, and completely ignoring the fact that your tank was running on empty. Let me get personal for a second. I was the queen of burnout. There was a time when I thought I could juggle everything: work, relationships, side projects, favors for friends. You name it, I was doing it. And let me tell you, I wore that exhaustion like a crown. I thought I was crushing it, but deep down, I was miserable. I was so drained that even the things I once loved, like creative projects, felt like chores. I had nothing left to give to myself. But here's the kicker. No one ever told me to stop because people don't mind when you're burning out for them. They'll gladly keep accepting what you're giving until you have nothing left. I'll never forget the moment I realized I was on the verge of a major burnout. I had agreed to take on a huge project at work, even though I was already buried under other responsibilities. I thought, I can handle it. I'm tough. But then, after weeks of staying late, skipping meals, and barely sleeping, I hit a wall, literally. I walked into a wall because I was so exhausted that my brain just gave up on functioning for a second. That's when it hit me. I was burning out, and it was my fault. I had been saying yes to everything except my own well-being. Here's where the deep message comes in. Being selfish is not only about protecting your time, it's about protecting your energy and your sanity. When you're constantly giving, there's nothing left for you. And let me break this down. Burnout doesn't happen overnight. It's like a slow leak in your soul. You don't notice it at first. Maybe you feel a little more tired, a little less enthusiastic, but you keep pushing, and one day you wake up, and it's like all the lights are out inside you. That's burnout. The way I see it, being selfish is self-preservation. It's understanding that you have a finite amount of energy, and if you don't start protecting it, no one else will. When you start putting yourself first, you'll be able to recognize when you're overextending. You'll learn to say no to that extra project, no to that friend who always needs a favor, no to the endless stream of obligations that drain you. Because here's the hard truth. If you don't start saying no, you're going to collapse. It's funny, isn't it? Society rewards you for being a workhorse, for going above and beyond, for always being the one to pick up the slack. But no one's handing out awards for taking care of yourself. I used to think that taking time for myself was selfish. Like, how dare I do something just because I want to, right? But here's the revelation. Being selfish is how you protect your energy, avoid burnout, and keep yourself from crashing. It's the ultimate act of self-care. Let me give you an example from my life. After that incident with the wall, still can't believe I'm admitting that on camera, I realized I needed to make a change. I started setting boundaries. I started saying no to things that didn't serve me. And guess what? The world didn't end. Sure, some people were annoyed when I couldn't jump in to help them at the drop of a hat, but my health, my peace of mind, and my happiness skyrocketed. I stopped feeling like a zombie walking through life. I had energy again, and with that energy, I could actually enjoy the things I loved, pursue my passions, and shockingly, be a better friend, partner, and colleague because I wasn't running on fumes. Here's the controversial part. Being selfish is not just okay, it's vital. If you're constantly giving and never taking, burnout is inevitable. So be selfish. Make time for yourself. Guard your energy like it's gold, because it is. Burnout is not something you recover from overnight. And trust me, it's not something you want to experience in the first place. Once you hit that wall, literally or figuratively, it takes time to build yourself back up. The deep message is this. If you don't start being selfish now, you're setting yourself up for burnout later. And no one is going to applaud you for running yourself into the ground. So give yourself permission to be selfish. Take care of you first, because only when you're at your best can you truly be there for others and avoid that dreaded burnout in the process. 3. You realize that not everyone deserves your time. All right, let's get real for a second. Not everyone deserves your time. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. In fact, if you're not selfish with your time, people will waste it for you. And here's the most controversial part of all. Some of those people might be your closest friends, your family, or even your co-workers. They might have good intentions, but the reality is that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your time, energy, and attention. Let me paint you a picture. You're juggling a million things: work, personal goals, maybe a relationship, and on top of all that, your phone lights up with a new text. "Hey, can we talk? I need advice," says your friend. Now, You care about them. You want to help. So, of course, you say yes. But before you know it, 2 hours have gone by and you've accomplished nothing on your own to-do list. You're emotionally drained and you didn't even solve their problem. That's because people will gladly take your time if you keep offering it, and that's exactly why you need to be selfish. Here's a personal experience to hammer this home. A couple of years ago, I had this friend, let's call her Sarah. Sarah was lovely, don't get me wrong, but she had a way of always needing something from me. Advice, emotional support, help with projects, you name it. I was her go-to person. At first, I didn't mind because, hey, we're friends, right? But over time, I started realizing that these interactions were one-sided. She'd vent about her problems for hours, but when I needed a shoulder to lean on, crickets. I was constantly giving her my time, but there was no reciprocity. And it wasn't just her. I noticed the same pattern with other people in my life. One day, after yet another long conversation where I ended up feeling drained while Sarah seemed relieved, it hit me. Not everyone deserves my time. Harsh? Maybe. But true? Absolutely. Being selfish taught me that my time is precious, and just because someone asks for it doesn't mean they're entitled to it. You need to be selective with who gets a slice of your time pie, because not everyone is worthy of it. And trust me, not everyone will appreciate it the way you deserve. This is where the deep message comes in. Time is the most valuable resource you have. It's the one thing you can't get back. Once you give it away, it's gone. So why do we treat it like it's endless? Being selfish with your time is one of the smartest, most empowering things you can do. It's about recognizing that your time is a limited currency and not everyone should get to spend it. The honest truth? A lot of people will use your time without even realizing it. They'll ask for a quick favor that turns into a whole afternoon, or a just need to talk text that spirals into a therapy session you never signed up for. And while it's great to be there for people, don't get me wrong, it's also important to ask yourself, is this person giving back what I'm putting in? If the answer is no, it might be time to reconsider how much of your time they get. Here's where it gets controversial. Being selfish with your time doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who values themselves. People might not like it when you start saying no or setting boundaries, but guess what? That's their problem, not yours. When I started to cut back on my endless availability, when I started saying, sorry, I can't talk right now, or I'm focusing on my own thing at the moment, you'd be amazed at the reactions. Some people got mad, others just drifted away. But what I realized is this. The people who genuinely care about you will respect your time and boundaries. The ones who don't, well, they never really cared about you in the first place. Let me tell you another story. After I started getting selfish with my time, something magical happened. I suddenly had time for the things that mattered to me. I began working on my own goals, hobbies, and personal growth. And here's the kicker. I was happier because my time wasn't being drained by people who only called when they needed something. Instead, I was filling my days with things and people that actually energized me. That's the beauty of being selfish. You get to choose where your time goes. Here's the deeper message. The people who deserve your time are the ones who respect it. When you start being more selective, you'll notice that the quality of your relationships improves. You won't have as many shallow, draining interactions, but instead, you'll have deeper connections with people who truly value you. And guess what? You'll value yourself more too. Being selfish with your time isn't just about protecting your calendar, it's about protecting your energy and your self-worth. Here's the reality. You can't be available to everyone and still be available to yourself. When you stop handing out your time like free candy, you start to see who's really there for you and who's just taking advantage of your generosity. Some people will call you selfish, but that's because they're used to benefiting from your lack of boundaries. When you set limits, they'll have to look elsewhere for someone to drain, and that's not your problem anymore. So the takeaway? Be selfish with your time because not everyone deserves it. It's okay to say no, it's okay to step back, and it's okay to prioritize yourself. At the end of the day, your time is your most valuable resource. Make sure it's spent on people and things that genuinely matter to you. 4. People respect boundaries when you set them. Let's dive into a topic that tends to ruffle some feathers. Boundaries. Yeah, I said it. Setting boundaries is not just some fluffy concept that life coaches talk about. It's a crucial part of living a balanced life. And guess what? People actually respect boundaries when you set them. Shocking, I know. But here's the kicker. If you don't set them, you're basically giving everyone around you a free pass to treat you however they want. And let's be honest, that's a recipe for disaster. Here's where it gets controversial. You have to be the one to enforce your boundaries. No one else is going to do it for you. In fact, people might not even realize you need boundaries until you set them. We've been conditioned to think that being accommodating and agreeable is the way to go, but let me tell you, being a doormat will only get you walked all over. I learned this the hard way. Let me share a personal experience. A few years back, I was working at a job where my boss had a habit of dropping last-minute projects on my desk, expecting them to be done yesterday. At first, I thought, okay, this is just how things are. I didn't want to rock the boat or seem unhelpful, so I said yes to everything. But over time, I found myself drowning in work. I was staying late, missing out on my personal life, and feeling completely burnt out. You know what? My boss had no idea I was struggling because I hadn't said a word. I was waiting for someone to magically get it. It wasn't until one particularly stressful week where I worked through the weekend to meet a ridiculous deadline that I snapped. I marched into my boss's office and said, I need to set some boundaries. It felt like I was speaking a foreign language, but guess what happened? My boss was shocked, not offended, shocked. She didn't even realize the impact of her requests. And the most surprising part, after I set those boundaries, not only did she respect them, but she also became more mindful of how she assigned projects in the future. This leads to the deeper message. When you set boundaries, people start to respect you more. It's like flipping a switch. Suddenly, they see you as someone who values their time and energy. When I started to enforce my boundaries, I gained not only respect from my boss, but also from my colleagues. They started coming to me for advice on how to set their own boundaries. It was eye-opening. People had been waiting for someone to take the leap and show them that it's okay to prioritize themselves. Now let's be honest, setting boundaries isn't always rainbows and butterflies. People may push back, and they might not like the new assertive you. But here's the thing, that's not your problem. I remember one of my friends was upset when I told her I couldn't always drop everything to help her. She said I was being selfish. But the truth was, I was finally prioritizing my own needs, and that made some people uncomfortable. And that's okay. Discomfort is part of growth. Another aspect of boundaries is that they can be contagious. When you set boundaries, you encourage others to do the same. It's like creating a ripple effect. One of my colleagues saw how I handled my workload and decided to start saying no to extra meetings that weren't necessary. Soon enough, others followed suit. We created a culture of respect for one another's time and energy. Who knew that by just standing my ground, I could positively impact the work environment? Now, here's the controversial part. You have to be consistent. Setting a boundary is one thing, but enforcing it consistently is what truly earns respect. If you waver or let people cross those boundaries because you feel guilty or want to please them, guess what? You're sending a message that those boundaries don't really mean anything. I learned this lesson the hard way too. After I set those initial boundaries at work, There were times I slipped back into old habits and said yes to things I should have turned down. Each time it felt like I was losing the respect I had just gained. But every time I reset those boundaries and stayed firm, I regained that respect even stronger than before. So here's the deep takeaway. Setting boundaries is a form of self-respect, and it invites others to respect you too. When you clearly communicate your limits, you teach people how to treat you. You're not only taking care of your own needs, but you're also creating a more respectful environment for everyone around you. It's a win-win. Next time you feel guilty about setting boundaries, remember this. You're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for everyone around you. You're modeling a behavior that can help create healthier, more balanced relationships. So go ahead, be a little selfish, set those boundaries, and watch as people start respecting you in ways you never thought possible. You deserve it. 5. You're not responsible for everyone else's happiness. Let's dive into a topic that can ruffle some feathers. You are not responsible for everyone else's happiness. I mean, can we just take a moment to acknowledge how freeing that statement is? You might be thinking, but what about my friends, family, or partner? Shouldn't I care about their happiness? Sure, caring is part of being human, but let's be clear. Taking on the burden of someone else's happiness is like trying to carry a boulder uphill. It's exhausting and completely unnecessary. Here's the controversial truth. You are not a walking happiness machine. You are not obligated to make everyone feel good or to be their emotional support system at all times. I know this sounds blunt, but let's be honest. Trying to make everyone around you happy is a sure way to lose sight of your own happiness. And guess what? The more you try to make everyone else happy, the more likely you are to become resentful and unhappy yourself. It's a vicious cycle. Let me share a personal experience to drive this home. A few years back, I had this friend. Let's call her Lisa. Lisa was going through a rough patch. She was unhappy in her job, her relationship was rocky, and she leaned on me heavily for support. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to help her, but over time, I found myself feeling drained. I was spending hours listening to her problems, giving advice, and trying to cheer her up. But no matter what I said or did, she never seemed satisfied. It felt like I was trying to fill a bottomless pit with happiness, and it was exhausting. One day, after yet another long conversation where Lisa kept lamenting her situation, I snapped. I said, "Lisa, I can't be your happiness factory. I have my own stuff to deal with." It felt liberating to say it, but I was terrified of her reaction. To my surprise, she didn't get upset. In fact, she paused and said, "You're right. I guess I've been expecting too much from you." And just like that, the dynamic shifted. I realized that by setting that boundary, I was not only taking care of myself, but also giving Lisa the opportunity to find her own happiness without relying on me. Here's the deeper message. You can care about someone without taking on their emotional burdens. When you recognize that you're not responsible for someone else's happiness, you empower both yourself and them. It's about teaching people to find their own path to joy. This doesn't mean you should stop being supportive or compassionate. Of course, be there for your loved ones, but know that you can support them without sacrificing your own happiness. This is where it gets controversial again. Some people might get mad when you stop being their emotional crutch. They might label you as selfish or uncaring, but honestly, that's their issue, not yours. When I set that boundary with Lisa, I realized that her anger was rooted in her own struggles, not my refusal to be her happiness provider. This is a hard lesson to learn. Sometimes when you prioritize your well-being, it can feel like you're letting others down. But the truth is, you can't pour from an empty cup. Let me hit you with another personal story. I was once in a relationship where I felt like my partner's happiness was my responsibility. I wanted to be the perfect partner and make them feel fulfilled. But over time, I realized that their happiness was a weight I couldn't carry. It wasn't my job to keep them entertained or to always provide emotional support. When I finally acknowledged that, it was like a fog lifted. I started focusing on my own interests, hobbies, and passions. And guess what? When I did that, I became happier, and so did my partner. Ironically, the more I prioritized my own happiness, the more our relationship flourished. Here's the bottom line. You cannot be the source of someone else's happiness. When you take that weight off your shoulders, you free yourself to pursue your own joy. Happiness is not a shared commodity. It's something each person must cultivate for themselves. So here's the controversial truth. If someone is relying on you for their happiness, it's time for a reality check. They need to learn how to find joy on their own. You can help guide them, but you can't do the work for them. It's a disservice to both of you if you continue to carry that burden. The deeper takeaway here is that prioritizing your happiness is not selfish. It's essential. When you're happier, you're more equipped to be there for others in a meaningful way. You become a better friend, partner, or family member when you've taken care of your own emotional health first. So let go of the idea that you have to make everyone else happy. It's time to stop being the happiness police and start focusing on your own happiness journey. In conclusion, you are not responsible for everyone else's happiness. You can care, you can support, but at the end of the day, each person must find their own path to joy. So take that weight off your shoulders, embrace your own happiness, and watch how it positively impacts everyone around you. It's time to prioritize you, and there you have it. Unapologetic reasons why being a little selfish is not just okay, but absolutely necessary. If this video stirred up some emotions, made you laugh, or even made you think twice about how you've been living, then I've done my job. Remember, putting yourself first isn't about pushing others away. It's about showing up as the best version of yourself so you can live a more balanced, fulfilled life. Now, I know this topic can be controversial, and maybe it made you uncomfortable, but that's where growth happens, right? So let me leave you with this. You owe it to yourself to prioritize your happiness, your time, and your well-being. Life's too short to live on everyone else's terms. Your dreams, goals, and mental health matter, and when you take care of you, everything else falls into place. If you've ever been called selfish for choosing yourself, wear it like a badge of honor, because that's the moment you took control of your own life. If you enjoyed this video, or even if it triggered some serious self-reflection, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw conversations like this. And hey, drop a comment below. Tell me what boundary you're setting this week or how you plan to reclaim your time. Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching. And until next time, remember, selfish isn't a bad word. It's a superpower.